Welcome to the Billion Insights podcast. I'm your host Shree. Today we are honored to have Professor Antony Lewis on our show. Professor Lewis has a unique blend of expertise in both cosmology and software development, making him a pioneer in combining technology with language. He is the creator and lead developer of WordWeb, a popular dictionary software used by millions of people worldwide. He also developed a popular puzzle maker software called Crossword Compiler. In addition to his work in software development, he is also a leading cosmologist at the University of Sussex, UK, with over 20 years of experience studying the universe. Today, we shall explore his journey, the story behind WordWeb and Crossword Compiler, and the future of language software and AI. So, without further ado, let's welcome Professor Antony Lewis to the show. So, welcome, sir. Welcome to the Billion Insight podcast. How are you?
Good. Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks for joining us.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, sir, can we start from the beginning? Can we start with your childhood?
So I was mainly brought up in South London, so I was the only child of a single mother. My mother worked in the diplomatic service, so the most interesting thing in my childhood was when I was about 7. We moved to East Berlin for a while, so we had a little while, whilst I was a young kid, living in the old Eastern Soviet half of Berlin. Then I came back and I completed my school in South London before going on to university after that.
If I'm not mistaken, you are in your 40s, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So how is like growing up in UK during the 80s for you?
I was a fairly sort of insular child when I was a bit later on, so I could have probably been brought up anywhere. It'd been quite similar, to be honest. I can't say I made much of the benefits of living in London when I was a teenager. I was more interested in other things, but it was good. It was fine, yeah. It's never always easy, is it? But
So, sir, when did you first introduce to a computer?
I think I got a computer, as a proper computer that you can actually program, when I was a sort of teenager. My parents gave me one for Christmas, and then I think I started with the ZX Spectrum, actually, originally, one of the very early sort of mainly game computers with a tape machine. Then a bit after that, I got his first sort of more like modern desktop kind of thing that you can try and do things on. So I had some fun trying to play with the ZX Spectrum, but at that point I really didn't understand what I was doing. I was just following some examples. And of course, it was very much harder in those days than it is these days to do anything at all on these machines.
Interesting. So, sir, do you remember when you first introduced to internet?
I think internet must have been just before I went to university or late. I remember having the dial-up connection when I was still at school. I mean, sort of internet started sort of gradually. It was a bit of a niche thing to start with, and took off. I guess I was quite fortunate in being just the right age to take advantage of the takeoff of the internet and be there near the beginning when people were first starting to download software and things from the internet.
Yep. Can you tell us the story, how you introduced to programming, and WordWeb is your first program, right?
I was mainly messing around before WordWeb was not my first program. My first sort of semi-commercial program was Crossword Compiler. And then, because if you're writing crosswords, you need to have definitions, then a natural thing to do was to produce a dictionary. So Crossword Compiler came first for making crosswords. Then WordWeb was sort of an add-on for that, but also a separate program that could be used more widely.
Okay. I thought the Crossword Compiler came later. So you made the Crossword Compiler, and to add on to that, you made the WordWeb later.
Yeah, that's right. I started to write the Crossword Compiler when I was still late at school, I think, during A-levels. I can't remember exactly when I started on WordWeb, but it had been several years later.
Yep. So you have an interesting background. You are a software developer as well as a cosmologist. So what sparked your passion for cosmology?
I was always interested from about the age of 11 in physics and chemistry. I started off most interested in chemistry, actually. I had a sort of big chemistry lab of all sorts of dangerous chemicals in the garden, which I was playing with and making explosions and things and having fun. And then I got more interested in physics later on. Read lots of popular science books. I can't say cosmology was actually I didn't have a drive to be a cosmologist specifically when I was a child, but I was certainly very keen on physics, and I wanted to be a physicist, I guess, from the age of about 13 or something. And then later on, the sort of crossword and WordWeb business was a backup plan, but it's quite hard to make a career in academia, so I had a fallback in case that didn't work.
Okay. So it was like a backup plan, the software development.
Yeah. Well, it was fun as well, obviously. I mean,
That's interesting. So, sir, before we dive into WordWeb, I have some few questions for you as a cosmologist and about the cosmology in general. You are a distinguished professor of cosmology at the Sussex University and have spent time at Cambridge, Harvard, and CITA. So, could you please share your experience at this institution with us?
The different institutions.
Yeah.
Well, I did my undergraduate and my PhD in the University of Cambridge. Cambridge has the big advantage of having several different centres of astronomy, and of course a very renowned history in this area. So there's an Institute of Astronomy, which traditionally did sort of observations and actually has a nice old observatory building. But there's also the Cavendish Laboratory, more from the sort of physics side, where many of the early radio observations were done. And there's also the Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics, which is where Stephen Hawking was. So these three departments all doing cosmology in slightly different styles, but with quite a lot of overlap. And I'm one of the few people I think who has actually been in all three departments. So I started doing my PhD in the Cavendish part of natural sciences. Then my first postdoc was in DAMT, which is the maths department. And then I moved later on to the Institute of Astronomy, where I did research. It's a very nice environment in Cambridge. You get quite a lot of visitors coming in, you meet people.
That's interesting. So, sir, how did those experiences shape your research in cosmology?
The cosmology direction mainly came from my supervisor during the PhD. I actually started off doing something a little bit eclectic and somewhat mathematical and obscure as my PhD, but towards the end of my PhD, I think my supervisor correctly thought I'd better do something a bit more mainstream and useful. So he sent me on a more cosmology problem. And that's when I moved more entirely into cosmology by writing some code actually that people use for doing theoretical calculations of the predictions for some observations that you can make to test the early universe.
So, sir, I have one rudimentary question about cosmology in general. For those who are never, could you explain how is cosmology different from astronomy or physics?
Cosmology is really, people normally mean it to refer to the sort of evolution of the universe as a whole. I mean, I guess you'd regard it as part of astronomy, I suppose. But astronomy would include things like the solar system and the galaxy. But the cosmology is usually things much larger than the galaxy. You're talking about the properties of the universe as a whole, very large numbers of galaxies collectively, and how the whole universe evolved, how it started, and what we can see. Whereas astronomy is basically anything you can observe that's not on Earth.
So, sir, what advice do you have for students who are interested in pursuing career in cosmology?
Firstly, I guess you want to make sure that it's something you really want to do. It is a very competitive field if you want to actually get a job in the field. I would recommend having a backup plan as well, like I did. Unfortunately, I didn't have to use it. These days, of course, computing skills are extremely important for most cosmologists. And people are mainly parts of very large collaborations doing quite detailed data analysis. So having good computer skills and ability to write data analysis codes and things is very important for getting up to speed on those things and being happy. You're quite comfortable spending many hours in front of a computer every day.
Yeah.
It's also quite a sociable field compared to doing something in the social sciences where you spend hours and hours in the library. You're often collaborating with many other people in these collaborations.
Yeah. How does your typical day usually look? How you balance your work as a cosmologist with software development?
I'm currently about 60% professor of cosmology and about 40% time doing sort of business things. I've sort of split it by day, so I just spend 3 days in the department and 2 days at home. But because it's very flexible doing software development, I move things around depending on what's happening. I go into the department if there's something happening there or I need to be around. So on the days when I'm a cosmologist, as it were, I just go in to work and as normal have a working day there. I do some work in the evening as well on either cosmology or answering emails and things, which of course goes on all the time.
That's interesting. So 60% to cosmologist and 40% to software development. Do you plan to increase the second one is a bit? Have you planned any other software to explore? Is there any other avenue you would like to explore in future?
I don't have any specific plans for any new software programs at the moment, if that's what you're asking about. I'm happy to hear ideas, but it's quite enough keeping up with 2 programs. I mean, I'm the only person mostly doing these things. It's quite a lot of time to keep on top of. So I think it's probably enough for the moment. Thank you.
So, sir, coming to the WordWeb, can you tell us the story behind the WordWeb? I mean, what inspired you to develop WordWeb from the beginning?
Yeah, so this came from having this crossword program, Crossword Compiler. And then when you write the clues, if you're writing sort of straightforward clues, you just want synonyms, possibly want definitions.
Hmm.
Even if you're writing cryptic clues, which is quite popular here in Britain, you also need synonyms as part of those clues. So having a dictionary or something that you can use as a quick way to look them up was obviously going to be very useful.
Hmm.
And there was a project at Princeton University called WordNet, which is a publicly available database of words and their definitions. It's a bit different from a traditional dictionary because they're sort of clustered into what they call synsets, which are groups of words which all have roughly the same sense. So that sense, you also automatically get synonyms because words are grouped together when they have very similar meanings. So I took the WordNet database and produced a user interface and made it a bit more friendly. What they published was mainly intended for researchers and sort of command line tools and some slightly clunky web interface. So I made a more friendly Windows program that you could use this with easily. And then over the years, I've added many definitions and improvements and other things to the actual database as well. It's not anymore just original public WordNet database. So there's still inherits quite a lot from that, and indebted to that original data source. Obviously, you can't write a whole dictionary from scratch yourself in a short time.
You need a reference point, the database to make the dictionary. Yeah,
that's right.
So, sir, when did you release the first version of WordWeb commercially? Which year it was?
Honestly, I can't remember. It would have been early 2000s, possibly. I'm not sure exactly.
I was searching it. Maybe it is in 1999.
That's possible, yeah.
Yeah, because I haven't got any concrete data about it.
I guess Crossword Compiler would have been 4 years old or something. Maybe that's about right. Yeah, I can believe that.
Yeah. So, sir, while developing the WordWeb, have you anticipated that the side project, the add-on to your Crossword Compiler, would evolve into world's most popular dictionary software?
I guess I was always hoping it would be more broadly useful for people as well. I mean, I wanted a dictionary myself to use, but I'm doing things on the computer as well as writing crosswords. So I think that was always an objective. So the idea was just to make it as easy as possible to look up words. For people who don't know WordWeb, you can control plus right click on a word in basically any program in Windows. It should actually work even if it's like a YouTube video or something which is really underlying an image. It doesn't have to be text. And it pulls out the text and looks it up for you in one click.
Yeah, I'm doing it
all
all
the time. That's just something I want to use myself. Okay, good. Great.
As I mentioned you earlier, I've been a user of the WordWeb for such a long time. When I was a child, I used primarily 3 educational software most of the time. One is the Microsoft Encarta, second is the Britannica, and third is the WordWeb.
Cool. In good company, that, yes.
Yeah. So, sir, do you think that Britannica and Encarta were the competitor to the WordWeb when you released the WordWeb for the first time?
So Encarta, as I recall, was Microsoft's encyclopedia come dictionary.
Yeah.
I think that came out probably after WordWeb did, but it was more aimed, like Britannica, it was more of a encyclopedic, sort of original form of Wikipedia.
Encyclopedia, yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't directly competitive in that sense, I think.
Yeah, but they kind of have a separate dictionary software along with that Encarta.
Yes, that's right. That was actually quite a good software. I think they didn't have a one-click lookup functionality.
No.
So
that is completely unique to WordWeb. I haven't seen any other software program implemented that feature.
Certainly when I started, there weren't any. I think there probably are a few others now.
Maybe nowadays, but I don't know any other popular software other than WordWeb.
Yeah, it's a harder thing to implement. It's a little bit hacky. So I guess, especially people like Microsoft wouldn't want to do something like that because you've got to be really careful with security implications and things if you're looking at words in any program.
Yeah. Can we talk about some technical aspect of WordWeb?
What would you like to know?
I would like to ask you, when you started developing the WordWeb, firstly, which technology you used then and how those technology evolved over time?
So Crossword Compiler and WordWeb are both written in Delphi, which is basically Pascal language, sort of modernized. In fact, I'm still using this as a sort of a historical, I guess, because back when I started, this was really very state of the art. It was a way of designing user interfaces by sort of pointing and clicking, and made it very, very simple and very quick to design and iterate on your programs. And it's still extremely fast and easy to iterate your designs and run test versions and things. It's very convenient for doing a rapid cycle of development and exploring how things happen. These days, I guess Pascal seems kind of a bit old-fashioned, like a modern Nokia phone. Back 20 years ago, Nokia phones were absolute state of the art, but these days it's still quite good, I'm sure, but not perhaps the most trendy thing.
Yeah.
So WordWeb is basically written in Pascal, yeah.
Delphi. That's interesting. So you still use the Delphi for the modern version of WordWeb, right?
The desktop version of WordWeb is still running on the latest Delphi, which is the modern version. It's a fully modernized, object-oriented. It's got all the standard features of standard modern programming languages. Of course, for the mobile apps, there's also an Android app and iOS app for iPhone, and those are developed separately. Those are codes written in the standard Android Studio for doing Android apps, and the Mac development system for doing Xcode, for doing iOS apps for iPad and iOS and Mac desktop.
Okay, so you completely went through the native route. Instead of opting for the hybrid approach like using React Native or Flutter, you completely went on the Swift for iOS and Kotlin for Android.
Yes, it's all completely native. That's right. I think I didn't actually have a choice when I started.
Yeah.
If I started today, I probably wouldn't have started from here. There are some advantages to that as well, because it actually gives you the native support. In some ways, maybe things will work better.
The caveat is you have to maintain two code bases separately. For iPhone, you have to manage a separate code base, and Android, you also have to manage a separate code base.
That's right.
And
the actual underlying code for looking up things in the database and things doesn't really change very much. It's not a massive problem. But yes, you do have to potentially, if you want to change something, you have to change it in 3 different places.
So the Mac version and the Windows version is kind of same, right?
The Mac version, I mean, it's completely developed independently. It's more similar to the mobile apps, actually, the Mac one. It has a slightly similar interface to the web one, because you can have tabs with different dictionaries in it. But it doesn't have the one-click lookup feature on Mac. As far as I know, you can't actually do that on Mac for security reasons.
Apple is not allowing user to do that. That's kind of funny, I would say.
I thought you probably could do some of it via accessibility tools, but they certainly don't make it as easy to do sort of hacky tricks as you can do on Windows.
So, sir, if you were to start a new project similar to WordWeb, or imagine that you had to start WordWeb today, so what do you think? Which technology you would adopt?
I mean, I would probably use some cross-platform, Electron or something. I haven't really played with many of them. I mean, for my cosmology work, I mainly use Python these days, so I could also try to use some cross-platform Python framework, I suppose.
Many developers I know, they are using Electron. It's quite popular.
Yeah, it seems pretty neat and well-maintained and up-to-date, and so, yeah.
But behind the scene, it's all Chrome, all Chromium.
Yeah, so you get all this underlying, very fast rendering and things, basically.
So, sir, what are some biggest challenges you faced during the development of WordWeb?
I guess the biggest sort of challenge in terms of keeping it up to date and things was the size of the number of words in English is extremely large. So that was always a bit of a challenge. I mean, I've been adding things manually, and I do track words that are not the missing that are on the website, and sort of so I can add things that I know people are looking for and are not in the dictionary. But it's quite a big task to keep it up to date. That way.
I just find out I wrote a review in WordWeb dictionary app in Android. In 9 years ago, I requested you in that please add a night mode option in 2015.
I must have read it, because I think I did, didn't I?
Yeah.
You can now get dark mode. That's right. Very good.
If you see that, it is,
Cool.
Yeah. So
you now choose a bunch of themes, including the dark theme.
Yeah. Sir, one of your video for the Crossword Compiler, I have seen where you talk about that you integrated some generative AI feature in Crossword Compiler.
So the recent AI tools are really getting to be very good at doing basic language kind of manipulation. They can write very fluently. It's not perfect, of course. There are hallucinations. They invent things, but it's definitely getting to the point where you can get something as a useful starting point for doing writing work. And in the crosswords, I guess there are 2 main things where this can be useful. The main one is probably for writing clues, where instead of looking things up and using definitions, you can get the AI to write definitions for you. Of course, you can specify extra instructions to tell what sort of particular style you want, or you can get to do jokey clues or punny clues. The AIs are not yet quite at the level where you can write full cryptic crosswords reliably, and that's a much more advanced. That might be something to look at soon. I'm sure it'll be possible quite soon, possibly with some work on my side. At the moment, it's more sort of straight definition, maybe a little bit humorous, fairly straightforward clues. So it just takes a list of things, unwritten clues, and tries to write clues for you. And you can iterate if there are some of the clues don't seem to work very well, because AI is not perfect. You can generate a set of other options to choose from. So you can use it as it's the usual way with these machine learning tools. It sort of allows you to switch from being the underlying writer to being the editor, in the sense you let the LLM do some writing, and then you tell it what things you want to regenerate and redo because they're not good enough, and if necessary you edit them yourself and improve it. The other thing you can do is you can generate word lists. So this is quite useful if you're a teacher or something and you want to make a puzzle. Maybe you want to make a puzzle with the words you've been teaching in some language class, or technical words you've been teaching in your chemistry lesson, you can just get it to generate a set of words based on a particular theme that you describe and generate the words. And then you can build a puzzle using those words. Then if you want to, you can get it to write the clues for those words as well using the AIs.
Yeah. I was checking the reaction of the people. They quite excited because you integrated the LLM's generative AI support. They are quite excited about it.
Yeah, it's particularly good, I think, for many people who are not doing puzzles in English, because I've provided lots of word lists and some clues for English. But if you're writing crosswords in Romanian or Ukrainian or some other language, then the AI tools, to the extent that they can write those languages well, it gives a very good way of getting started in those languages as well. And I think it's been quite very useful for some of those people.
Yep. Crossword Compiler is used by mostly, it is kind of a B2B tool, right? It is used by newspaper company, something like that, right?
It's sort of got three different branches, I guess. Yes, there's the newspaper companies, maybe people who want to use it for in-house publishing or want to put puzzles on their website. But the way that the newspapers work, like the New York Times, is that individuals submit their puzzles to the paper, and then the crossword editor looks at them and selects them. So another chunk of the market is just people who are individual people who like writing crosswords and submit. And some of them submit them commercially, some of them don't. Some of them put them in local papers. And then the third branch would be people who are educators, people who wanting to make puzzles for the classroom or other sort of educational platform, reinforcing learning and testing.
Yep. So, sir, do you have any plan to integrate it into WordWeb? Do you have any thought on it?
It's already there. In fact, in the latest version, if you Control plus right click on a word in a document now, it will extract the context. And if you're online, it will give you a context sensitive definition of the word. So it will use the fact that it knows what the sentence the word is in and give you the definition appropriate from the use case that it's in. This is also particularly good if it's not in the database, because you can also do it on super technical documents. The AIs have a very deep technical knowledge of all sorts of technical fields, so it'll also be able to define technical words for you. This is only on control right click on a word in a sentence in a document where you've got the context. Of course, if you just type in a word, it hasn't got the context, and it can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a very good way to improve the sort of direct utility.
So I would like to ask you some technical aspect of it. So have you integrated a local LLM into it, or you are getting it from the API, from like OpenAI or Anthropic or Google Gemini?
Yeah, so at the moment, these are all using the API. So basically just sending a request to the server, getting it back from the server. I think the models you can run currently locally are not quite good enough. Maybe they're good enough for some purposes, but certainly if you want to do cross-language things or detailed technical vocabulary, I think you probably want the more advanced models. The Crossword Compiler. I mean, they can switch around depending on which model is best at the current time. Of course, models are evolving incredibly rapidly at the moment. But at the moment, it's either using Claude or OpenAI.
Okay, so at this moment, you are using OpenAI and Claude. Okay, and lately, OpenAI API price has been greatly reduced.
Yeah, the mini version of OpenAI.
Yeah, mini version.
Cheap now. So the free version of WordWeb uses that, and the pro version of it uses the non-mini version.
Okay, free version also you have to burning your money, right, to provide this, unless there would be a time where this computer becomes so powerful to run this local LLMs. Considering the advancement in hardware over the years, such as how Apple changed the game with the introduction of the M1 Mac, and we are witnessing the same with the ARM space for Windows also. Companies like Qualcomm, MediaTek are developing ARM CPU for Windows, making ARM version of Windows a reality and increasingly powerful as part of the M1 Mac. Ultimately, it is beneficial for us because we can able to run the local LLM into our machine. I tested some local LLM. It really worked very great, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's nearly there. Yeah.
Yeah. Right, I mean, this could mean that the developer may not need to rely on third-party LLMs through the API for basic to moderate generative AI functionality in their app, as this AI operation could be handled directly on user's device. So what's your thought on this?
I mean, I think that will definitely happen. Of course, at the moment, if you want it to be sort of backwards compatible with people who are using 5-year-old machines or something, you can't rely on having good hardware and things. I think, as I said, at the moment, I think the models that you can run locally are not quite as good as the cutting edge models for doing things where the quality and accuracy really matters. But yeah, certainly I was expecting that in the coming years there'll be some way of doing it directly on Windows using the these laptops they've been producing and things. The modern machines will be able to run pretty good LLMs locally, and then yes, it can all be done a bit faster locally on the machine.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have to pay any API.
Right, yeah, and I wouldn't have to pay for the free users to use it either.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So currently you are burning the money to giving away the free AI access to the free user.
Yeah, so at the moment, the free version of WordWeb, it's not actually a huge number of requests because it's only on the control plus right click. So and
Okay.
the API is very cheap and the length of a single definition is quite short. So far, it hasn't been very much money, but if millions and millions of people start using
Yep,
it, I might
yep,
have
yep.
to change my mind about that. Yeah.
Yep, yep, yep. I've seen that $1 you will get 1 million requests. Less than $1, some couple of cents, you will get 1 million requests. So it's quite cheap.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And thanks to Meta, the Mark Zuckerberg, he actually made this thing becoming so cheap because he introduced so many open source llama model.
Yeah, and they're not actually the best Llama models are not actually that much cheaper. I mean, you're dominated by the computing cost of actually running the inference, so you still got to pay for the computing cost even if the actual underlying model is free. So I think using Llama is a little bit cheaper, but it's not a huge amount cheaper if you want to
Yep,
use
yep.
one of the larger models that's computationally expensive.
So, sir, what's your thought on AI in general?
I think AI is in the last year has basically transitioned from being slow, unreliable, and not useful in many cases to being actually quite useful in quite a lot of cases. I certainly use it quite a bit. I think some people who are skeptical of it don't sort of type in a prompt and expect to get a perfect answer out, and then they're disappointed because it isn't. Normally, the ways I use it are much more iterative than that. You're treating it as someone doing some work for you, and you're the editor, so you tell it what you want, and then you iterate a bit and get to best. So I use it in my academic work for sort of rewriting things to make things clearer. Or if you're writing papers with collaborators who aren't native English speakers, it can get it to improve the English. You can improve my English as well. I mean, these LLMs these days actually write better English than I do in most cases. Well, certainly it's not something you would want to use verbatim, I think, at the moment in most cases, but with some interactive input with the humans, it's certainly very useful. I mean, I think in the sort of research area, it'll be useful for lots of sort of simple, repetitive tasks, which you can speed up quite a lot, but there will always be this core of more difficult things where it probably doesn't help very much, I suspect. Things are changing very rapidly. So
Yep. So what's your thought on this? People are scared because of the AI will be replaced programmer. I mean, many people are saying that the software engineer will be replaced by the prompt engineering. So what's your thought on it?
I mean, there may be some truth in that. You've also got to be the actual, someone's got to decide what to build and what they actually want and what the requirements are. So I guess it's right. It'll become a sort of a higher level job, and the very low level, repetitive, boring bits of coding will all be done automatically by the LLMs. I mean, some of these code development environments that automate parts of the development are already doing pretty good things, I think. I mean, they're not there yet where they can do everything by any means, but
soon we will have a new programming language that will not be understood by the human, but it will be understood by the machine, and it will be very efficient than the traditional programming language.
All right, maybe, yes. Right.
It only contains the symbols and all, so that we cannot possibly understand what is exactly going on. It will only produce through the prompt engineering.
Right, yeah. I mean, that may be what's going on in O1, the latest ChatGPT model that does these internal conversations. I don't know whether they're using English, but I guess that to be efficient, they shouldn't be using English. So maybe they're already talking in their own language.
Yep. NVIDIA CEO once said that everybody is now becoming a programmer because there was a barrier earlier that you have to learn so many things. You have to learn computer science and all in order to understand programming and all. But now, thanks to this AI, the LLM, the generative AI space, everybody is kind of becoming programmer. So do you think that there would be a relevant of computer engineering, or do you think that we do not need to study computer science anymore? What's your thought on it?
I think until there are full AGI, at least, as sort of general intelligence people, you'll need people to actually do if you want to develop new algorithms and things, we're not currently at the point where you can actually do sort of really qualitatively new things. They're extremely good at producing things that are similar to things that have been done before, or variations of it, making small generalizations. But I think someone has to write the low-level architecture and things. So I think there'll be a role for some time yet, but I think that what people actually spend their time doing will probably change a lot. Yeah.
So, sir, you mentioned AGI, artificial general intelligence. So, what do you think? How far we are from having true AGI?
It's very hard to know. I think. I mean, it seems fairly clear that the human brains are fairly intelligent. So we have one proof of principle that it's possible. So it seems likely that it will happen at some point. Whether it's going to be in the next 5 years or 50 years or 100 years, I think is rather less clear. I mean, it's certainly clear, I think, that the sort of the current sort of large language model on its own is not going to become AGI, but maybe by the time you've got networks of agents and you've got some recurrence and internal monologues and things maybe by that point. Yeah. The problem is it's going to be very hard to tell, isn't it? And the goalposts are going to move. I certainly don't see any reason why it wouldn't happen wherever you draw the goalposts at some point.
Yep. So, sir, coming to WordWeb, what made WordWeb so popular and still relevant dictionary software after multiple decades? If you allow me, I would like to share my opinion first.
Please do.
I believe two factors that contribute to WordWeb's success. First is the intuitive and solid user experience. And the second is very great, appealing free version, I would say. I mean, it's a quite generous free version. It is very hard to find a good quality free versions with that to ad free. There is not a single ad, not in the phone version, not the PC version, anywhere. That's my theory that made the WordWeb so relevant.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I hate ads personally, so anything that's ad free is good. And I wanted it to be free basically, and then just have some extra paid versions that people who need extra features can buy. But for most people, if you just want to look up definitions, you can use the free version. I'm sure that it's always much easier to get people to use a free program than to get them to cough up some money for it. So I'm sure that certainly was a very big driver of it, yes. I guess originally, when it started, there wasn't very much choice either in what was available. There weren't many dictionaries that were usable.
Yeah, since I'm not a native English speaker, I need dictionary time to time, but WordWeb is my go-to dictionary. One thing I really hope that you add a feature in WordWeb that support for some other languages. So what do you think when we will see that WordWeb supports all the other languages?
Well, as of a month or so ago, the latest version, if you Control plus right click on a Hindi word, it will look it up and give you the English translation. And likewise, you can set a language so that if you look up an English word, it will give you what's your native language?
Yeah, but using the LLM, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But what do you think? Do you have any plan to integrate the native support for the other languages? I have seen that there is a section in WordWeb. There is a section of WordWeb that when I click edit, there is a custom WordWeb database. I guess we can technically put any other language support into this existing version of our WordWeb, right? If we have the database of a particular language. Is that true, right?
Yeah, that's right. You can just import any list of words with definitions. It doesn't matter what language they're in. You can import them as a custom database and use those. That's right. Yeah.
But you have a proper format in order to WordWeb to detect it, right?
Yeah, it'd be a standard 2-column kind of spreadsheet with a word in one column and a definition in the other column. Then you could import that.
Actually, in the past, I tried to find the relevant database for the WordWeb, but I couldn't able to.
Yeah, I think there's not very much public, free, easily usable cross-language databases that you could use. It probably is there if one dredged around, but I suspect these days going forwards it will be easier to use LLMs as
that's the ultimate solution.
Yeah.
But I able to get some database, but it is completely in different format and it is very difficult to make it compatible with the WordWeb. Maybe, sir, you could have any portal in your website where people can put the list of the word and it will convert into the relevant WordWeb supported, able to importable database. So it would be easier.
Yeah, there are some free dictionaries that do have supported add-on dictionaries in different languages, and I think you can get them. I kind of didn't want to get into it too much because there's too many different permutations of languages you could want, and maintaining any level of quality would be quite difficult. Yeah, it would be nice. I agree, but there's so many languages, and so much data in each language, and so much subtlety in how you translate things and define things. It's difficult to do that.
Sir, if someone from our listener have a good grip on a particular language, if he or she want to contribute their language expertise into WordWeb, let's say if they wanted to put a Odia language, which is one of the languages of India. So if they want to integrate Odia language, if they have the skill, the knowledge about the words and all, is there any way that he or she could contribute this?
Well, I mean, they could certainly make a custom database doing this additional language, either with definitions in that language or mapping it to English. WordWeb at the moment is designed as a uni-language dictionary, really. So there isn't a clean interface for having sort of multiple separate languages installed at the moment.
Okay.
So I think there's not a very clean way. If you want, the idea is to do that and then share it. You could certainly do it and share your database file that people could import and use in their own versions of WordWeb. But there's no particular way to get it into the main product. Of course, for the main product, you want to keep it reasonably small as well. You don't want to bloat the download with built-in packages of languages which many people are not going to use.
But if there is a starting point to do that, that would be a great, I would say. Maybe people can contribute through GitHub, and if somebody want to, you will pull it through directly from the GitHub. You will link into the particular repository, and people will fetch. All the languages will be show up there.
I see. Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah. It might be quite difficult to get people to contribute quality databases, I think. I mean, I've tried sharing things in Crossword Compiler with WordList, and I've got a few contributions which are good, but it's nothing that really adds up to anything very substantial.
So, sir, whenever you install WordWeb for the first time, it will ask you that you have to agree that you must not have to flight more than 3 times in last year in order to use the free version. If you exceed the 3 flight a year, then you have to opt for the pro version. So, sir, can you tell us the story behind this approach of the WordWeb?
Yeah, I guess everyone who writes software, the objective is to get as many people using it as possible and to get the people who can afford it to pay as much as they can and they think it's worth. So I certainly wanted it to be used broadly and so that people who don't have much money could just use it for free. So I wanted to think of some simple way to test. Of course, you can only do it really on an honesty system, but one way to test whether you're at least moderately wealthy is whether you've taken flights, because most people who take flights regularly are well beyond the poverty threshold. So it's a very crude, but it's fairly clean. Very occasionally there may be people who have exceptional cases where flights have been bought for them or something. But most people take more than 2 flights a year can also afford a small amount of money to buy WordWeb Pro. There's a way of doing that, and maybe on the margin adding some extra cost to flying flying is very bad for the environment. It's one of the hardest things to decarbonize for long distance flights. There's only many people in the UK fly far more than is at all sustainable, and it's it's very hard to tell whether it's actually productive or counterproductive in that sense. But it was one way basically of trying to use the fact that the marginal cost of software is 0. So it obviously makes sense from a sort of societal level to have as many people use it and for free as possible. Also wants to have one's backup career, so one wants a little bit of money coming in as well.
So, sir, can you tell us about the inspiration behind this strategy?
I was always quite interested in climate change and policy and things, and so yeah. But I say it's very hard with these kind of innovations to know whether they annoy people and are counterproductive or they're actually helping by raising awareness. And some people, I think, misread the question and think it's encouraging them to fly. So I'm not saying this is necessarily a net positive. It's very hard to tell, unfortunately. Otherwise, I might have pushed it a bit more. Yeah, certainly I haven't seen many other people doing that.
So, sir, I want to talk about a serious issue that the software industry has been facing since its inception. We all know that the piracy has been one of the biggest challenges in the software industry, with many popular applications falling victim to it, and WordWeb is no exception. So my question is, how do you think the piracy situation today compared to when you first started developing WordWeb?
I guess it's certainly more prevalent now because there's much more easy access to large numbers of Chinese websites and things where you can access these things. On the other hand, many of these sites also attach all sorts of other software to it and bloatware and things, so it's probably become much higher risk these days. Downloading a crack, so you have no idea what other horrible things you're installing at the same time. So to that extent, the risk profile of doing it has probably got worse, but the accessibility has probably got much easier. I mean, I'm not too obsessed about these things. Ultimately, most of the people who are getting cracks are probably not going to buy it anyway as an alternative, so you can't basically stop it. If you're going to produce software that runs entirely offline, some fundamental level, you can't really prevent it. I mean, one advantage of having AI tools running via an API is that, of course, then you can prevent it because you've got a connection at each point to check whether the license is valid.
To tackle that, many developer opt for the subscription model. As a consumer, I don't like the subscription approach, but as a developer, I understand that why it is necessary. And I have recently noticed that WordWeb has adopted a subscription model for the PC and the Mac version. I believe this is the first time that WordWeb has chosen this approach, right? Due to the LLM integration and all.
I switched as the default to subscription about 3 years ago. I mean, some people really hate subscription, so I still offer a one-off purchase.
Yeah.
But the idea was one-off purchase only offers 1 year of support, so you don't get sort of ongoing updates. So if you want the ongoing updates, then you need to get the subscription. Yeah, I understand why some people don't like subscriptions, but the idea is that they keep the price per year reasonably low, that it's then worth it, rather than upgrading every 4 years or 3 years or something, which people used to do.
Yep,
It should
yep,
be
yep.
should mean you can get updates sooner. I mean, I've been adding these AI features, every little bit more every month or something. Whereas in the old days, if you were doing one-off purchases, you've done a major upgrade, and people have had to wait a whole year and a half or something for the new features.
Yep, yep,
Certainly
yep.
not getting things out there much sooner.
Okay, so I have another question. This is an age-old question. Why there is no Linux version of WordWeb yet?
Yes, it comes mainly from the software that I'm using to develop it. So Delphi is mainly a Windows program. So there have at various points been versions of Delphi that can target Windows, but they certainly haven't been very stable or well maintained. The number of users of Linux is actually a lot smaller, or certainly was a lot smaller than on Windows. And also people on Linux are much less likely to pay for things because it's kind of an open source community. So there has been a little bit of demand, but not very much demand. And it is something I could probably do, but it's another thing to maintain, and the heart sinks having to maintain another version of something which is not going to be used very much.
Yeah, yeah. Can you set that number of paid user of the WordWeb? Is there any number would you like to share?
It's a very tiny fraction of the number of free users. I can tell you that. I mean, it's many thousands, I guess. Well, not very many thousands, but some numbers. It's definitely not millions, unfortunately.
That's why I told you earlier, the free version of WordWeb is so generous. It offers so much.
Did you buy the pro version or not?
Sir, to be honest, I haven't, but actually I have bought the pro version on the phone, but I'm planning to buy the PC version.
Okay.
The reason behind why I bought it in the first place, earlier days, because it gave the audio,
Yeah, that's right.
Since I am a developer, I know that whenever I use a product for a longer amount of time, I generally buy that product.
Yeah, if you've got something you like to use, it's nice to support the developer.
Yep. It is an Indian thing that there is a thing called karma. If you are a developer, if you expect some other people to buy your product, you have to buy other products too, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I buy other people's software as well. Yeah.
Yep. I do remember many of Windows software, which is earlier it was so good, but it's completely abandoned by the developer because they couldn't able to sustain the software because nobody was paying their software. So we kind of lost those great software,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm sure that's happened.
Many software and games also.
Yeah.
So, sir, this is one of the reasons to tackle the piracy, you went to the subscription route, right?
Not say I was actually thinking about piracy, really. It was more a question that I didn't want to have to do these massive updates. And, it'd be better to have smaller updates, which were easy to test and get people rolling rather than having to persuade people to buy something once every 3 years or something, 4 years, which is what I was doing before. Not sure it makes a huge difference to the piracy, really. I mean, you can check the validity of the license in one-off purchases as well, so it doesn't necessarily help super much, I think, with the piracy.
Another thing is in the WordWeb itself, if someone has already have the API key, just like me, I have my own OpenAI API key. If there is a way in WordWeb itself that if I put my OpenAI API key so that all the traffic will be billing into my API account.
Yeah. I haven't actually had any other suggestions for that in WordWeb yet, but I've had a couple of suggestions for doing that with Crossword Compiler. It makes the interface a little bit more complicated. It's certainly something I could do. I guess if it becomes integrated with Windows or something soon, then that will become a little bit more redundant because you wouldn't need that interface. But yeah, that's definitely something you could do so that people can use it as much as they want to. But of course, most people, casual users, don't have their own API keys and they don't want to hack around with these things. It's much easier to use the built-in things where I take care of everything for them.
Yep. So, sir, what advice would you like to give to someone who is passionate about starting their own product, software-based startup?
I just think, well, I guess make sure there's something useful that it's doing that people actually want, because it's very hard to know that. Of course, it's a completely different world now from when I started. The rules have changed really quite a lot. It's much more difficult to get noticed starting from nothing, I suspect, now than it was, especially now everyone can produce simple little apps. Thinking about how to actually get it known and used is probably a more important thing these days than the old days, where you could rely a little bit on word of mouth and being patient.
Okay, if you were in your 20s today, just imagine that you are in your 20s. So what would you explore today if you have to start from scratch?
Well, I guess I would probably be looking at something related to the AI applications or multi-agent systems, or I mean, there are tons of So if I had a really great idea for a startup, I might be doing it. So I don't. I mean, there are lots of amazingly cool things being done, and also in the sort of physics applications where you can, if there's some small experiment you can run locally and sort of train machine learning models on these small, you can automate it. You can do all sorts of very fast explorations of things that were impossible before. There's been some quite rapid progress in various niche areas by doing that kind of thing. That's very cool. Yeah, I don't have any. I don't have any grand vision for what I would like.
It is more important than having the idea is to build a team, I would say, so that it would be easier to start, because the world is changing in every other day in terms of technology.
Yeah, it's not clear whether you need more or less of a team these days, I guess, because now you've got LLMs and things. One person can do a lot more.
Yeah, that is true.
It's
That is true. One person could do. I have seen a tweet. Somebody is claiming that he has created a Adobe Premiere type of application in 1 month using the Cursor and Claude API. No.
Yeah, it's probably not quite that, is it? Yes. You can do a lot. You can do a lot. Yeah.
Yep. So, sir, we are on the last segment of our podcast. It is called Instant Insight. I will ask you some quick question. You have to answer as fast as you can.
Okay, I can try.
Okay, sir. So, are you ready?
Yeah, hit me.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Cats or dogs?
I had a cat when I was a child.
Beach or mountains?
Mountains.
City or countryside?
Countryside.
Blue or green?
Blue.
Most used app on your phone?
Podcasts. By hours.
Really? So you are into podcasts?
Yeah, I listen to quite a few podcasts. Okay. And I use my desktop for doing email and things mainly. So I guess by time, it's probably the podcast in the background. I'm not really using the phone for that.
Early bird or night owl?
I'm both, actually. I think I'm a bit dead in the middle of the day.
Most recent hobby you picked up?
A bit of gardening, growing fruit trees and things when I moved to Brighton.
Define yourself in one line.
Oh, that's an impossible question. Art.
What is your go-to stress relief method?
Stress relief. Walking, I would say, or cycling, or exercise or something.
Travel back in time or forward in time?
I think forward in time, if there is a future sufficiently far in. Yeah.
If you could have a dinner guest, dead or alive, who would it be?
That's a good one. A physicist, you can't resist someone like Feynman or Einstein or one of these famous people and characters.
Yeah. Best gift you have ever received?
Well, I guess in terms of impact, having the computer when I was a kid was the. I certainly got to spend many hours on that machine.
Yeah. If you haven't have computer in your early days, then we wouldn't have the WordWeb today. So it is kind of a butterfly effect.
Right. Yeah. Maybe.
So one thing you like to learn?
I guess I'd like to learn a bit more about the underlying. I know some of the basics of how these machine learning tools work, but only at the sort of overview and background technology level. Getting into actually some of the detail of that would be interesting. I think beyond why. I mean, question probably of using it for yourself. You only really understand things once you start trying to learn it and apply it yourself more.
Like creating your own LLM model.
Yeah, not necessarily an LLM, but some other kind of machine learning thing, or understanding how these recurrent networks and how you put them together. And
Yep.
There's so much stuff I don't know that. I mean, it's always fun learning new things.
Sir, if you weren't a software developer or a cosmologist, what career would you pursue?
I'd probably go into something semi-technical on sort of clean energy development, transition. So much stuff to do there in so many interesting fields and things going on.
Interesting.
Thermal or whatever, nuclear.
Interesting. Best way to handle success?
I just keep fairly grounded, I guess, and yeah. I mean, I haven't had that much success. It hasn't been a problem really. I think.
I'm talking to the creator of WordWeb, sir.
Yeah, world famous. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, sir. I just want to ask you the opposite question here. Best way to handle failure.
Oh well, failure is just a learning opportunity, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
the process of doing a PhD is making all sorts of horrible mistakes and realizing a lot of things are harder than you thought, and all the wrong ways you did things and how to do things better. And yeah, so failure is definitely an opportunity.
Most challenging part of being a developer.
It's keeping most annoying things, just keeping up with the incessant way that all sorts of annoying things just keep changing. Every year there's a new version of Android and iOS, and something breaks and
Yes.
yeah.
I can totally feel that. Every other time you're getting a mail from Google that it's a deadline, you have to update your app.
Exactly, yeah. And log in and update all this new stuff.
Yeah. Most rewarding part of being a developer.
I think it's sort of a creative thing where you just see something being produced that wasn't there before and having it produced. Quite satisfying, I think.
Yeah.
Producing something from nothing in a sense.
Yeah. Just converting your vision to the reality, that is the most amazing part, right?
Yeah, or seeing your vision evolve when something different. Oh yeah, how it develops.
What is your favorite IDE, the integrated development environment?
Well, for Python, I use PyCharm, which is pretty nice. I mean, the Delphi integrated development, it's a little bit buggy, but it's pretty good and slick for doing graphical user interfaces. Yeah, PyCharm is the other one I use most of the time, particularly for Python. I use VS Code a bit as well. I think it's not that much to choose between VS Code and PyCharm these days. And of course, VS Code has plugins for lots of other languages. I think you could do that with PyCharm as well. But
sir, when you started developing the WordWeb, have you used any version control software in that point of time?
No. Back then, I think Git didn't exist. Probably SVN probably existed, but I didn't. Yeah, and I only started using Git.
Okay.
I don't know, 10 years or so after start, I guess. It's just making traditional backups in the old way. Yeah.
If you could only use one programming language for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I mean, it would probably be Python at this point.
Python.
Being very actively developed, and you can. It's a little bit limiting, but it's gradually getting better in terms of performance and multi-threading and things.
Favorite tech tool you can't live without?
I guess the LLMs are starting to get to that point where
we're kind of getting used to it, so that yeah.
I mean, web search more generally is probably the fundamental thing. It's very difficult to live without.
Yeah. Biggest opportunity presented by AI today?
Maybe it's in the biological sector. I don't know. I mean, if you can do very large searches over these proteins and things, maybe you can find new antibiotics and things that we're going to need very soon.
Yeah. The super vaccine.
Yet to be seen whether they can actually solve any of these major problems, but it's certainly very promising. I think for automating parts of healthcare as well. Lots of healthcare systems are overloaded. I think a lot of the mundane consulting can be done by AI if it's suitably integrated with a human and some human overview.
Yeah. So, sir, if WordWeb could talk, what would it say to its user?
It's saying, buy me.
I kind of anticipate this answer from you.
Yeah.
In my opinion, what it would say to me that, hey, you searched this word in last month. Why you are searching that word again? You have to remember that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. What is more fun to you, building puzzles or solving them?
I guess you could think of sort of doing science as solving puzzles, but in the sort of traditional actual game kind of thing. I don't know. I've gone down into the creating them. I don't actually create puzzles myself very often these days, apart from for demonstration purposes. I'm more doing writing the software to do the creation. I think they're both fun. It's just different.
What's the one AI development that's worries you the most?
I guess there's the whole existential risk arguments about whether these things are going to become, agentic and something that we can't control. And there's pretty active arguments about that. I mean, I don't understand the people who say this is not going to happen with 100% probability. I mean, there's no way they can actually know that.
The singularity.
A lot. Well, yeah, I guess possibly doesn't necessarily have to be an exponential explosion, but there's some way in which they get out of control and either subjugate us or just accidentally delete us because they need all our resources. There's something else they want to build because they've been misspecified.
Yeah.
So I guess there's that. And then also, of course, all the more practical problems with AI will also quite worrying than the usual things you hear about.
What's your favorite movie?
Yeah, there's a fun movie called Goodbye Lenin, which is set in East Berlin after the fall of the wall, and
Goodbye,
with a
Lenin.
young kid about the age I was when I was there tries to pretend to his mother that the wall is still up because she's ill in bed, and it just sort of invokes the sort of the aura of Eastern Bloc countries and preserves it. And it's extremely funny if you ever actually lived there. It's kind of a niche thing that I'm not sure people who haven't lived there would necessarily understand quite how absurd it is.
What's your favorite book?
I really liked Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go. It's set in it's one of these books where you don't know what's going on for quite a long way through it, and it's all a bit odd, and you have to piece together what's happening. And he writes extremely well.
Okay.
And it has some interesting implications and ideas in it.
The most influential person in your career?
At sort of practical level, whoever does your PhD, supervises your PhD, is usually the most influential person in practice, because that sort of defines your research direction and the skills you acquire and how you approach problems. And I think Antony Lazenby was my supervisor. It was probably it certainly put me in the direction of the research I'm doing. So in that sense, it was quite influential.
Okay, sir. One last question. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
So no, it's probably something relating to learning from mistakes and using them as an opportunity, not a failure, something like that. I don't know. It's hard to know what you've been given as advice and what you've picked up from elsewhere, and
Yep. Thanks for sharing that, sir. And that's the end of the podcast. Any final thought?
It's been quite fun talking to you. So thanks for your enthusiasm about WordWeb and things. Hello everyone. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to Shree's podcast, The Billion Insights. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to rate us 5 stars if you enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Antony, for sharing your amazing story with us today. Hearing about your WordWeb grew from an idea into one of the most popular dictionary tools in the world is really inspiring. And it is also inspiring for who wants to build a software and bring new ideas to life. Your thought on technology, AI, and cosmology have given us a lot to think about. It's been a great lesson for anyone interested in developing their own project. So thank you so much, sir, for being in our podcast.
Thanks for the fun conversation.
Thank you. And to our listener, if you want to learn more about WordWeb and Professor Antony's other project, check out the link in the description. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in the next time on the Billion Insight podcast. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and stay curious. This is Shree, your host, signing out. Peace.